Zelensky's statement comes as reports of drone incursions along NATO's eastern flank have become increasingly frequent. Ukraine intends to work with Poland and other European partners to establish a reliable defense system against aerial threats. Earlier, Russia launched a massive drone attack on Ukrainian cities, killing several people and leaving many injured. Drone sightings have become more common across Eastern Europe, once again sparking urgent discussions around European security. Further, President Zelenskyy also noted that he believes U.S. President Donald Trump's attitude towards European and Ukrainian security has changed. Let's listen in to what President Zelenskyy has said.
The drone wave against Poland on the night of September 10 was a test not only for Poland but for all NATO. Russian jets violated Estonia's airspace, and the new drone incidents in northern Europe are another test for NATO as a whole. Russia is testing how far it can go. It wants to shift attention away from the brutal war it countries against Ukraine. Ukraine proposes to Poland and all our partners to build a joint, truly reliable shield against Russian aerial threats. And this is possible. Ukraine can counter all types of Russian drones and missiles. And if we act together in the region, we will have enough weapons and production capacity for these. If Russia loses the ability to strike in the skies, it will be unable to continue the war.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this news that has just come in, what are the potential benefits and challenges for Ukraine calling to build a joint aerial defense shield with their European allies?
Asuma, good to be with you again.
Thank you.
This whole discussion, there is one point that's been made by others that is rather important to remember, is that when the Russians are sending drones, or it appears even though they may deny that, say it's a mistake, into Poland, when we are seeing drones going into Copenhagen, even though they're then saying that may be someone locally, we have to look at the disruption that that brings, because then planes are grounded, things are checked out. And going back to the point in regard to the Polish border, while that happens, then what it means, it disrupts any assets that may be then assigned to Ukraine itself, and then NATO have to then look at, do we need those assets ourselves in regard to defending any nation that's joined in with the NATO alliance? So all of that then is playing out. And of course, no, it's not surprising that Ukraine are turning around and saying, look, we need air defenses. We are then pushing for that because of the tit-for-tat drone attacks that are happening into the Ukraine. And then, of course, the Ukraine has been rather successful in doing, and with their attacks into Russia and attacking the infrastructure of Russia in regard to oil and gas. That's a fact. That's what's going on. The other fact is that even though Russia may have, of course, got access to more soldiers, military hardware, their progress into Ukraine has been extremely slow, and that it appears that the Russian army has been extremely good at keeping that progress slow, and also in regions pushing back. So as we have discussed before, and especially when the weather changes and it becomes, into winter, when hardware can get bogged down, we are then seeing potentially this stalemate. But as President Trump has said, Zelenskyy just alluded to that his attitude towards Ukraine is then changing, because he has been reliant on saying, well, look, I've got a good relationship with Putin. We got on well in my first administration. And of course, then it's been all, Russia, and all these other accusations that have been, that are not true in regard to him and how the Democrats accused him of that. So Trump is then relational. He is also He's frustrated because he thought he could solve this quickly, and Putin is still firing. They are still attacking Ukraine, and now with the potentially providing Tomahawk missiles, which Zelensky has asked for, and all of that, and with Russia turning around saying, well, who is going to be responsible for giving the orders on these? And remember, these are missiles that can go 1,000 miles, if my own research is correct. They've been used in theaters of war, fired about 2,350 times. They are a proven missile. So all of this is then up to discussion, and on the sidelines, people, are getting killed on both sides. There is destruction within the Ukraine. The Russian economy is not in a good place whatsoever, and we all want this war to end, and that doesn't seem to be happening likely at the moment. However, by Zelensky turning around and saying, I want air defense in Ukraine, then that could really deter in the future any more incursions from Russia in this regard, because who has control of the air then has control of what is happening on the ground. Asuma.
And Mark, you've already touched upon this, but what do you think? What was the basis of President Zelensky saying that America, or particularly President Trump's attitude, he thinks is changing towards or warming up towards Ukraine? What do you think? Why did he say that?
Well, I think as I've alluded to just a few seconds ago, is that I think there is frustration. I think there is frustration on part personally of Trump personally. Remember, he will be getting intel. He will be getting intel and looking at pictures of the awful devastation and the amount of lives that are lost on the Ukrainian and the Russian side. If you are a true humanitarian and human, you're going to be looking at this. Now, unfortunately, since February 22, when the Russians invaded, and of course under the Biden regime, and Trump always says this, they did nothing. There's no negotiations whatsoever. We're just going to pile weapons into the Ukraine, and there is a heck of a lot to unpack there in regard to the Democrats, whether it's, as I said earlier, Russia, Hunter Biden laptop, Burisma, the whole caboodle. But we are living in a high stakes real world game that has changed very much. And I think it comes down to sheer frustration. Now, the other thing is, and I hope not, if it means that people like Lindsey Graham are managing to whisper into the administration's ear, if not into the Trump ear personally, then we also have a problem, as he's such a war hawk, and there will be others. Then there will be others like him. And I am not excusing the fact that Russia invaded a sovereign country, but there's so much history to then work out in regard to on the Ukrainian border and Russia. Do they speak Russian? What country do they want to be part of? And also when we saw the breakup of the Soviet Union, all of this is still playing out, Asuma, and very often within the West, we may not fully understand that, even though clearly other analysts do, Asuma.
Right. With that, thank you very much, Mark, for joining us and sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for. And now we stay on this topic. The Kremlin has responded to reports that the United States may supply Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, saying that it has heard the claims but remains uncertain on who would be providing the target plans, whether it would be the Americans or Ukrainians. Additionally, Moscow has stressed that these missiles would not be a panacea and are not likely to change the situation on the battlefield. This comes as Ukraine is expected to receive American BGM-109 Tomahawk missiles, enabling strikes deep into Russian territory. U.S. President Donald Trump further has said that who had previously denied Ukraine's requests for long-range missiles has reportedly given the green light for long-range attacks, as he's reportedly frustrated by President Putin's refusal to engage in peace talks. This follows a closed-door meeting he held with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly last week. Now for this discussion, we go back to Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for staying with us. Now, we don't know who and when will this exactly Tomahawk cruise missiles will be delivered to Ukraine, but if it does, what strategic impact could this do? And Ukraine, will this deter Russia in how Ukraine wants it to?
Well, you use the word panacea, and that comes from the Russian side by saying this would not be a panacea. In other words, this will not then, in their eyes, they're turning around and saying, well, if Ukraine has this, then of course, and it will be a game changer, but in their eyes, it's saying, well, we're not going to stop this war. You are now stepping up this. And as you have just read out in that report, and the Russians have said, as we were just saying earlier, that by actually supplying Tomahawk weapons, the Russians have already alluded on a propaganda level to turn around and say, well, who is actually giving the targets in regard to our country? And that if Americans are involved, or any other NATO country is involved in that, then it will be seen as an act of war. So this whole escalation. And again, I suppose ideally for some, right, well, we'll give a Tomahawk weapon. We want this to be seen as a threat, because if we can then fire up to 1,000 miles into Russian territory, then that should be a threat. And also within that technology, depending on the data control of a missile, it then if we read various reports, you read about it, then has the ability to hover in a particular area, and then be given a final instruction of where to go. That's if the technology then works. And as I said earlier, they have been used 2,350 times. It is, the unfortunate thing is people then feel pushed. The President Trump says that. Remember that when they are providing these missiles, NATO, the Ukraine then have to pay for them. This isn't, well, we're just going to give you these missiles for free. I think that has also been out there in the Trump lexicon in what he has then been saying and explaining. Of course, all of this is dangerous. It is dangerous, as in also to look at what the technology that Russia has, which is extensive in regard to their missile systems. So you fire one Tomahawk at a Russian target, what the Russians going to do, then fire a missile into Central Europe. Well, frankly, God forbid, but this is what everyone is trying to avoid. But the frustration levels, I'm just surmising here, within President Trump himself, is off the charts, getting way off the charts, because he's turning around and saying, I'm trying to have this conversation with Vladimir. Then, will you stop this? We have talked about this before, which is trying to get people around the table, hence being last in Ankara in Turkey, where it's just prisoner exchanges.
Yes.
Asuma.
Right. Thank you.